Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. I have other sheep that do not belong to this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. It was 3 a.m. about 20 years ago when I got a phone call. This was the time before smartphones. It was on a landline. And when I picked up, at first, I didn't recognize the voice. Can you please send me some money? I heard. And then I recognized the voice. No, I said, you know, I can't do that. Please. No, I can't, I repeated. And then the person started crying. Please, the voice repeated. Don't call again, I said. And then I hung up. The voice on the other line belonged to a relative of mine. She was a homeless heroin addict. When Jesus says, I am the good shepherd, left unsaid but equally true is the reality that you and I are not the good shepherd. Having a drug addict in the family will teach you that lesson. No matter how hard we try, we cannot force a person to change. Doesn't matter how many second chances you give, how many times you ignore that they stole your money, how fervently you beg, you cannot be their good shepherd. And the same is true for all our relationships. There is no faster way to damage a marriage than by trying to make our husband or our wife into the good shepherd of our life. And the same is true for our children, our parents, our friends, our mentors, our therapists, our sponsors. None of them can bear the weight of being the good shepherd. None of them can bear that burden except the true good shepherd, who is Jesus Christ. But so often we don't want to hear his voice. And even worse, some of us aren't even given the chance. I used to teach classes to incarcerated men in the New York State prisons, at Sing Sing and Ossining and at Fishkill in Beacon. So many of my students were African Americans, and so many were serving incredibly long prison sentences for drug offenses they committed when they were in their early 20s. It was around that same age, her early 20s, that my relative got addicted to heroin. These men were sentenced under the so-called Rockefeller drug laws. These laws, signed by the governor of New York, Nelson Rockefeller, in May of 1973, mandated that the sale or even the possession of a small amount of hard drugs like heroin, just a few ounces, meant a minimum sentence of 15 years and a maximum sentence of 25 years to life. Consequently, most of the men in my classes had a lot of time remaining in their sentences. But one student, let's call him Mr. Adams, was going to be released just a couple months after the fall semester started. He had been in prison over 25 years for drugs. And during one class break, all the guys started to talk to him about his impending release. And I walked over and joined them. Mr. Adams, I said, what are you going to do after you get out? And he said, I want to work with at-risk youth. I want to tell them how to live the right way so they don't make the same mistakes I did. I was so hard-hearted, he continued, so stubborn. If I could go back to meet my 20-year-old self, I would tell that knucklehead to change his ways. I would make him listen to me. I'll never forget the way he said, make him listen to me. With such passion and energy, but there was also a sharp edge of pain, a pain we all recognized. Because honestly, even if he could go back in time, his younger self probably wouldn't have listened to him. No matter how hard we try, we cannot force a person to change. My relative finally hit bottom. She eventually listened to the voice and found her way back to the light. These days, she's off drugs. She's a loving mother to several healthy and intelligent children. And except for the marks on her arms from the needles, she is the picture of middle-class normalcy. She was allowed to make mistakes. She was allowed to follow the wrong path until she was ready to hear the voice that brought her back. But when he got into trouble with law enforcement, Mr. Adams wasn't given the same chance. He was a 20-year-old African-American man caught up in the height of the war on drugs. He wasn't given a chance to hear the voice that could bring him back. Instead, he lost over 25 years of his life, the prime years, his 20s, his 30s, and most of his 40s, all lost in prison, just because he used drugs. For all of us who have received the transformative power of grace, the transformative power of God's grace, which was purchased by our Good Shepherd on the cross, can you pray with me this week? Can you pray with me that God will enlarge our imaginations to picture a world where, with this same grace that so many of us take for granted, can be freely offered to everyone, no matter the color of their skin? Amen.